If, like me, you're also a fan of campy horror films from the early 2000s, you might have heard of the Underworld franchise. While opinions are largely divided on the quality of the later films, I'm personally a fan of the first film because of its techno-gothic aesthetic and its fresh take on the vampire-versus-werewolf rivalry, mixed with action sequences that clearly took inspiration from The Matrix. But what made the film especially memorable for me during later rewatches was the surprisingly layered world-building created by screenwriter Danny McBride and first-time director Len Wiseman. It also made me curious about the history of the Lycans and their feud with the vampires before the events of the first film. Although we later received the 2009 prequel film Underworld, Rise of the Lycans, an earlier exploration of the mythology had already appeared in comic book form through the 2004 three-issue miniseries Underworld, Red in Tooth and Claw. Written by Danny McBride and Chris Oprisco, with art by Nick Postic and Nick Marinkovich, the comic explored an origin for Lucien's closest ally, Raze, who was played in the films by franchise co-creator Kevin Grevious. It's important to note that this story is generally treated as a non-canon account of Raze's transformation, and conflicts with the later history established for him in Underworld, Rise of the Lycans. The comic takes place primarily in East Africa in 1373, and serves as an interesting bridge between the medieval Lycan rebellion and the events framing the first film. So in today's video, we will explore this three-issue miniseries and delve into one of the strongest and most loyal characters in the franchise. Without further delay, let's get into it. The Legend of Cororo. The first issue opens during the final battle of the original film. Lucien is seemingly dead after Kraven shoots him with silver nitrate bullets, and his trusted right-hand man Raze is determined to take revenge by killing the vampire Soren. Soren's well aware of Raze's brute strength and sharp fangs, and attacks the Lycan with his silver-edged whip. Although the burns caused by the weapon are painful, Raze refuses to accept defeat. With Lucien apparently dead, the Lycans' hope of winning their war against the vampires also appears to have died. After enduring Soren's attacks, Raze transforms and ruthlessly kills him. But the satisfaction of victory doesn't last long. Victor, one of the vampire elders and one of the central figures behind the centuries-long war, arrives at the underground Lycan base. Raze charges at him, but Victor catches him by the throat. As Raze approaches death, he experiences flashes of his early life. His mind returns to a time and place before he was a Lycan, when he was simply known as Cororo. We are then transported to East Africa in 1373, where Cororo kills an adult male lion with his bare hands to protect his village. Although his people respect and fear lions, Cororo believes the animal is responsible for the recent attacks that the village's local healer, the Mganga, has blamed on a supernatural devil. By killing it, Cororo hopes to prove that the so-called devil is nothing more than a dangerous animal. Yet, the villagers continue to believe their healer and agree to guard their livestock that night. Nearby, in the open grasslands, a group of Lycans is hiding from the Death Dealers, who are determined to eliminate Lucien's surviving followers. The Lycans cannot risk being discovered, and they're secretly traveling towards the sanctuary city of Axum under Lucien's leadership. Some members of the group doubt that the sanctuary even exists, and fear that they will die of hunger before reaching it. Lucien addresses their doubts and insists that Axum is no fool's quest. Once they reach the city, he says they will be protected, regroup with other surviving Lycans, and build an army capable of fighting back against the vampires. Lucien also warns his followers to stay alert and leave the exposed grasslands as quickly as possible because Death Dealers are operating in the area. Unknown to Lucien, the vampires have already tracked the groups by following a trail of slaughtered livestock. The leader of the Death Dealer squad, Veyer, orders his troops to wait until the Lycans have fed and become vulnerable before attacking. Meanwhile, warriors from Cororo's village discover another group of slaughtered animals and decide to destroy the creature responsible. Predictably, the hunt goes badly. One of the villagers is killed, while another returns gravely wounded. Unable to understand what attacked them, the villagers seek help from the Mganga. The charlatan assures them that he alone can protect them from the evil that comes by night. The villagers begin relying on him more heavily, unaware that he is exploiting their fear to establish himself as their all-powerful savior. Cororo still refuses to believe in a supernatural devil. He argues that another wild animal must be responsible and urges the villagers to form a new hunting party, but no one agrees to accompany him. Cororo ignores the Mganga's warnings and begins investigating alone. During his hunt, he discovers the remains of a lion and strange tracks nearby. For the first time, he begins to wonder whether the Mganga might have been right about something unnatural stalking the area. Following the trail, Cororo discovers a group of Lycans feeding on an elephant. At the same time, the death dealers are preparing to ambush Lucian's group. Before either side can act, Cororo charges towards the Lycans. The vampires decide to remain hidden and watch, expecting the human warrior to be killed. Instead, Cororo manages to kill one of the Lycans while the creature is still in human form. Both Lucian and the vampires are astonished by the near impossible feat achieved by an ordinary human. Vayer instructs his death dealers to continue waiting for his signal. However, another vampire named Lazar becomes impatient and fires his crossbow early, injuring one of the Lycans and ruining the element of surprise. Vayer's left with no choice but to order the attack. Surprised by the sudden assault, several Lycans flee while the death dealers capture one of their wounded companions. They also restrain Cororo. After witnessing his immense strength and fighting ability, Vayer decides to keep him alive and eventually turn him into a vampire. One of the death dealers wants Cororo killed because he has seen too much, but Vayer believes such a formidable human warrior could be useful. The vampires interrogate the wounded Lycan, demanding the location of Lucian and the others, but the captive refuses to answer. While the death dealers discuss what to do with their prisoners, Cororo breaks free and attacks them with a heavy log. He drives the vampires back and frees the wounded Lycan. Watching from nearby, Lucian orders his followers to attack while the death dealers are distracted. The Lycans transform and overwhelm the vampires. After witnessing the violent battle between these inhuman creatures, Cororo becomes terrified and attempts to escape. However, Lucian quickly catches up with him. In the final full-page panel, Lucian tells Cororo not to be afraid because he has plans for him. He then bites the warrior, beginning Cororo's transformation into one of the Lycans. A devil is born. The second issue begins with Cororo reliving disturbing flashes of his encounter with Lucian. A large opening image and a series of smaller panels capture his terror as he remembers being bitten. When he wakes from the nightmare, Cororo finds himself surrounded by the Mganga and other villagers. The healer offers him a potion. Cororo immediately becomes suspicious because he's not accustomed to receiving kindness from the man. His doubts prove justified. The Mganga is using Cororo's condition to convince the villagers that only he can save them from the devil, and the trick is working. After finding Cororo wounded in the forest, and seeing that he failed to destroy the creature, several villagers have begun turning against him. Cororo becomes angry and asks what the healer has actually done to stop the attacks. The Mganga ignores the question and declares that Cororo will die soon. Nearby, the surviving death dealers regroup after the Lycan attack. Vayer orders them to move quickly and establish a new camp because Lucian's followers know their location. Lazar objects, claiming that retreating will convince the Lycans that their attack succeeded. Vayer, still furious about Lazar firing before his command, tells him that the failure was his fault. He also threatens to report Lazar's behavior to the vampire elder Marcus. Lazar dismisses the threat, calls Vayer a coward, and blames him for the deaths of the other vampires. He claims that if he had been in command, he would already have destroyed the Lycans. After declaring his defiance, Lazar leaves the group to hunt Lucian's followers on his own. Back in the village, the people become increasingly concerned because Cororo is not responding to the Mganga's treatments. They cannot afford to lose the bravest warrior and protector of their tribe. As the moon rises, Cororo's new instincts take hold, and he begins showing the first signs of transformation. The villagers become terrified and ask the Mganga for help. Following the healer's instructions, one of them strikes Cororo with a club. The blow has little effect. The Mganga then declares that Cororo is no longer human and has been possessed by evil spirits. He urges the village leader, Jumbi, to order Cororo's execution. After some debate, he agrees. In a nearby shelter, the Lycans discuss their victory over the death dealers. Lucian arrives and tells them not to celebrate. With the diversion created by the powerful human warrior, he explains, they might not have survived the attack. He praises Cororo's fighting abilities and tells his followers that they should fight with similar ferocity. Some of the Lycans respond that they cannot truly kill the vampires and that their safest option is to find Axum and take shelter. Others continue questioning whether the sanctuary even exists. Lucien reassures them that their fortunes will eventually change, even though the Death Dealers have managed to track them. Back in the village, Cororo is attacked under Jumbi's command. He manages to defeat the first group of warriors. When more villagers arrive to kill him, Cororo finally transforms fully into a Lycan in a dramatic full-page image. Now possessing strength far beyond that of an ordinary human, he attacks and subdues the villagers before fleeing. Elsewhere, Lazar encounters the wounded Lycan prisoner from the first issue. He questions the captive about Lucien's destination. When the prisoner refuses to answer, Lazar tortures him and threatens to kill him. The frightened Lycan eventually reveals that the group is traveling towards the sanctuary of Axum. After obtaining the information, Lazar murders the captive and takes his head, hoping his discovery will impress Marcus. In the final full-page image of the issue, Cororo embraces his new Lycan form and howls beneath the moon. After losing his old tribe and human life, he decides to search for the Lycans in the hope of finding a new family and a new beginning. Raze against the vampires. In the opening pages of the final issue, Cororo explores the full extent of his new abilities while traveling through the East African wilderness. His eyes can now see through the darkness, and his enhanced hearing allows him to detect sounds that would have escaped him as a human. He soon discovers that his sense of smell has also become extraordinarily powerful. While moving through the forest, Cororo discovers the headless corpse of the Lycan whom Lazar murdered. The sight and smell of the dead Lycan fill him with rage. Although he never knew the victim personally, Cororo now feels as though one of his own kind, a brother, has been murdered. He follows Lazar's trail. Meanwhile, the villagers are beginning to lose faith in the Mganga. He failed to protect them from Cororo, and they fear that the transformed warrior will return to attack the village. The Mganga realizes that if he wants to maintain his power, he must appear to defeat the devil himself. He leaves the village carrying weapons and charms, determined to prove his authority and end the threat. Elsewhere, the Death Dealers are moving their camp while Veyer oversees the operation. Lazar returns carrying the severed head of the Lycan prisoner. He tells Veyer that they no longer need to relocate because he's discovered where Lucien's group is heading. After learning about Axum, Veyer orders his soldiers to prepare an ambush near a ravine east of the sanctuary. Deep within the forest, the Mganga continues searching for Cororo. After realizing that he has been walking in circles, the healer becomes frightened and attempts to find his way back to the village. Instead, he encounters Veyer and the Death Dealers. At the same time, an enraged Cororo follows the scent of the murdered Lycan and reaches the vampire's position. He begins attacking the Death Dealers, while Veyer confronts the Mganga. The healer claims that because Cororo came from his tribe, he can invoke their common ancestors and destroy him. Recognizing that they share an enemy, Veyer allows the Mganga to help. Their plan is quickly ruined when Cororo goes on a rampage and kills the vampires one after another. The Mganga gives Veyer a talisman made from Tumbili bone, claiming that its ancient power can kill Cororo, but the talisman has no effect. Cororo kills the vampire attempting to use it. Furious over the failure of the charm and the deaths of his soldiers, Veyer turns on the Mganga and kills him. Cororo continues tearing through the remaining Death Dealers. He eventually reaches Lazar and takes revenge for the murdered Lycan in one of the miniseries' most violent action sequences. Much later, Lucien and the surviving Lycans continue their journey towards Axum. Suddenly, they detect a familiar scent. Cororo emerges carrying the heads of the dead vampires. He asks Lucien to accept him into the group because he can no longer return to his village or his former life. Lucien asks what happened to the Death Dealers. Cororo proudly explains that he destroyed their camp. Impressed by the warrior's strength and ferocity, Lucien accepts him. He welcomes Cororo into his new family and gives him a new name, Raze. On the final page, the story returns to the Lycan base during the events of the first film. Victor kills Raze by breaking his neck and driving a blade through his body. As the light fades from his eyes, Raze releases his centuries-long existence as a Lycan. In his final moments, he is Cororo once again. Well, this brings us to the end of the video. Even though the comic follows a fairly familiar werewolf origin structure, what makes it an effective reading experience is the atmospheric art by Nick Postic and Nick Marinkovich. Because the story takes place mostly at night, the artwork combines Gothic imagery with expressive uses of light and shadow. At times, the visual approach recalls the heavy shadows and dramatic compositions associated with Mike Mignola's work, particularly Gotham by Gaslight and the early Hellboy stories. That comparison is naturally subjective, but the art is undoubtedly one of the book's strongest elements. The comic also does a good job of humanizing Raze and exploring the survival instinct of the Lycans, something that the original film only had limited time to examine. However, it's important to remember that Red in Tooth and Claw is generally treated as a non-canon origin. The later film, Underworld, Rise of the Lycans, presents Raze as a human slave who joins Lucien's rebellion in Europe, which is incompatible with this story of an East African warrior transformed by Lucien while the Lycans search for Axum. So this miniseries is best approached as an alternative origin for Raze rather than a definitive part of the film timeline. Still, if you want to enjoy a moody werewolf story with brutal action and striking visuals, this comic might be right up your alley, regardless of your opinion of the wider film series. What do you think of this miniseries? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to share the video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next one.